Alright, firstly, I just want to say I'm sorry if my voice is a bit off. I've been recovering from a cold that I'm slightly dying from. But yeah, no, we should be good. So, today we're going to be making an ad for a chocolate brand using Blender. Product animation is one of the most lucrative jobs you can have as a freelancer using 3D software, and just a great overall skill in Blender as it encompasses modeling, rigging, animation, and primarily lighting. You can have a terrible model with disgusting materials and hide that all with great lighting. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First things first, we're going to want some chocolate. After a few attempts, I started with a single piece and modeled it to my liking using bevel as I went along. Once I was happy with that, I simply used the array modifier twice to build out the whole bar. Kept it pretty simple. For its material, I just used the basic principled BSDF and used a noise texture for the roughness controlled by a color ramp with this little gizmo here. I'll leave it there for a second so you can copy it if you want, or you can just pause the video, you can do that. To make the wrapper, I extruded the plane with a solidify modifier. I chose not to apply the solidify modifier to maintain flexibility. I made the folds like you would see them in a real cardboard box or wrapper or whatever you want to call it, and left them open so later I could rig them. The textures were super easy. I opened another blend file and made a plane and gave it a new texture. I mixed two emissions together and mixed them using a Voronoi texture. That way you get this really cool pattern you can see. You can move it around and size it by adding a mapping and texture coordinate nodes. Then I add text, choose a font I like, and if there are none here that you like, you can download more for free on the internet. I gave it a golden texture, made two other variations for the other types of chocolate, and rendered the image in 8K. Normally, I wouldn't render that high resolution, but because we're going to see the wrappers up close, I want there to be a fair amount of detail. And because we're also rendering all three of them in one big picture, we're just going to need those extra pixels. Go back to your other file, UV project from view, and apply the texture to the wrapper. Now, when you look at wrappers like this, sometimes the printed text is shiny whilst the card itself isn't. To get that look, we're going to put an image texture through the color ramp and then chuck it into the roughness of the material. You can play around with the color ramp until you get the text shiny and everything else looking rough. I also like to add a noise texture in there to give it even more variation. That'll do. For rigging, I just added some basic bones on the flaps and did some simple weight painting. It's super easy, especially since I had not applied the solidify modifier. I duplicated it twice and simply changed the color of the chocolate to have a white, dark, and milk chocolate. And because we rendered all the textures in one big image, we don't have to make any new materials for each wrapper, so we can just go to the UV unwrap of each object and slide it across. Then wham, we have three different chocolate bars, super easy. Now, onto the animation. First, I like to pick a song out to get the feel of how the ad will go, if that makes any sense. I have a subscription to Epidemic Sound, and they have a big selection of songs and also sound effects to choose from, all of which you can use without the worry of copyright on YouTube. I found this one.
Always there to help and listen. You're just a friend when I come undone. I have to fall.
And picked a 20-second part that I liked and brought it into DaVinci Resolve, which you can get for free. One thing I've started recently implementing into my workflow is doing viewport renders and making the whole product like that before I've even done a single actual render. This way you can get a real sense of the flow of your video without wasting any time or any of your electricity bill on doing big long renders only to realize that you don't actually like one particular render. For an ad around 20 seconds long, we probably need around 6 shots. I would highly recommend just getting a piece of paper and doing some terrible squiggles of some ideas you have. Ironically, you can be a terrible drawer and a great 3D artist. I mean, at least I believe that. Here were some of mine. You're terrible. Anyway, then I like to go into Blender and start blocking out the shots. Now, I want the first section of the ad to have some cocoa beans falling like they're being grinded up or something. To be honest, I'm not fully sure how chocolate is made, but this is probably important. I made these 4 beans by adding icospheres, subdividing, and adding a displacement modifier, literally using the pictures of the beans I'm going to use for the texture as the displacement image. It's like wobbly enough. UV project unwrap and find different beans for different beans, if you know what I mean. Then we can make a collection by selecting all the beans, pressing Ctrl G, and you can name it whatever you want. Now I make a small ramp and put an object at the top to give it a particle system. I play around with the settings a lot and get a nice flow going. I ended up using the fluid physics because it seemed to look better and flow better. I don't know why, sometimes things work. You can create whatever setup you want. I went with a ramp going into a funnel and set it up with 3 different cameras and did my viewport renders. And this is what the 3 of these things look like together.
Always there to help and listen. You're just a friend when I come undone. I have to follow.
They're not too shabby. Like you can see what I mean. Like it's not rendered, but you can get an idea of what it's gonna look like. Now for the actual chocolate scene, I highly recommend just listening to the music and closing your eyes and really imagining what would look cool and feel cool at each part of the song. You really get a sense of what the next shot should be or where you should go with it. I felt something like this would fit well with this part of the song.
I have to fall apart to get to see you again.
When animating motion like this, particularly with product design, the motion has to be motivated. And by that, I mean it should move for a reason. Here, it moves up and back in sync with the music. Maybe in your scene, there is a light or some other type of motion that motivates it. As long as there is motivation, that is the key. I highly recommend using the Graft Editor to get the motion nice. Using the Normalize button up here with your keyframes selected really helps you see what's happening. Smooth motion and points where the object seems to hang on a point looks really nice, but always depends on what you're animating. If it's a stiff robotic thing, then you don't want smooth, so just play around and see what looks nice. But by stretching out these Beziers a little bit, you can see it makes a real difference. This next shot, I used a constraint to track the camera to an empty and then animated it gliding across. I then animated the chocolate exiting the wrapper using the techniques previously mentioned. For the last shot, I wanted something big. So I attached all my chocolate to a circle and made it follow a path instead of pressing parent. I duplicated it a few times, changed the speed of some of them, and then bam, you have this cool tunnel of spinning chocolate, Willy Wonka. I then got single blocks from each bar and made them into a group and created another particle system so that all the chocolate would fall. I turned the gravity down because it looked nicer when they fall more slowly rather than just raining chocolate. Now for the logo. I got the same text I had before and placed it right in the center. I gave it a solidify modifier and then converted it to mesh up here where it says mesh. I then separated each individual letter and scaled it in time with the music, scaling them from 0 up to 1 on the beat to try and make it in sync. And I don't know, you don't have to do this, but I thought it looked nice. I then went and lit every single shot, mostly using area lights and trying my best to highlight on the parts where you want the eyes to be drawn to, like the most important bits, like the writing on this wrapper, for instance. I also made sure to get some highlight lighting, which is lighting from an angle and behind, so you really get the shape of each object. You can use HDRIs instead if you like. There are plenty of great free ones on polyhaven.com. The only shot where I used a HDRI was the last one, where there is so much stuff going on that it would be hard to light manually. I mean, look how much stuff is falling. It would just be a nightmare. But for shots that are a bit more simple, like the first two, I definitely recommend playing around and trying to create your own lighting setup and seeing what looks nice. There's plenty of tutorials online about lighting, but it really sets your renders apart from the rest of the crowd. Once I have all my shots, I line up their viewport renders in DaVinci Resolve to see if it all flows nicely. Here was one of my reject shots that I thought didn't fit, and I saved time by only viewport rendering it in a minute rather than spending hours waiting for the render to only find out I hate it and it didn't fit in anywhere. So I think it's a really good workflow. Once you have all the shots you like cut to length, you can render them all in cycles overnight or whatever. And here, drum roll please, is the final product.
Always there to help and listen. You're just a friend when I come undone. I have to fall apart to get to see you again. You only have a heart when mine is bleeding, some kind of friend.
The last shot wasn't perfect to be honest, but I'm overall happy with it. In case you were wondering how I got the background to be white without affecting the lighting of any of the objects, here is my compositing node setup, borrowed from the YouTuber Smeef, who is an incredible Blender artist, and I hope to one day be as good as him. He has a great channel and loads to learn over there. I'll link him below as well. Thanks so much for watching. I'd love if you could take the time to like and subscribe. It really helps out, especially for small channels like mine who are just trying to get started out and have like 9, 10 subscribers. Anyways, I wish you all the best in your Blender adventures. If you have any requests for tutorials, let me know in the comments, and I will catch all of you later. Ciao. Tschüss. Bye.